took this photo shortly after I took last week's photo. It was actually on my way back to my office. In fact, come to think of it, this tree, this magnolia tree, is literally right outside my office. And in some ways, this is similar to last week's photo, but in other ways, it's pretty different. First of all, the color scheme, it's monochromatic. I've titled this photo DYNIX because the green and white color palette of this photo reminds me of those old DYNIX computers from the 1990s that used to be in libraries. At least that's where I use them. And I've got a screenshot on the blog, or I've linked to a screenshot on Wikipedia of one of these DYNIX systems. And if you ever use one of those, it's nice to have a little bit of perspective whenever you're fed up with your iPhone or your computer for today, like your MacBook. It's nice to think about how things were back in the day. And whatever frustrations your iPhone is giving you, it's probably a lot better than what we had back with early computers. So anyway, compared to a lot of other photos I've taken, this is a really boring, bland color scheme. It's all these dull greens and browns and earth tones, and that's okay. I like doing photos like that sometimes. But there's another thing that's very different about this photo, which is last week I talked a lot about how I positioned the subject so that it had that bright spot of light behind it. Here I intentionally did the opposite. I positioned myself such that the subject, this magnolia seed pod, is against a dark patch of the background. And I did that because I wanted the two elements to complement each other. I wanted the bright lights on one side to serve as a complement to the, I don't know, not bright, but the yellow greenish subject of my photo. So that the two elements are kind of working together to create a complete composition. I could have, in fact, I did take some pictures where the magnolia seed pod was shifted over a little bit and it was against the bright parts of the background. But then you had this big gaping empty black part of the image where nothing was. And it felt incomplete. It felt like it was not a complete composition. Like the entire frame wasn't being utilized as well as it could have. So whereas last week I shifted myself to one side to put my subject against a white background, now I shifted myself to in a different way to put my subject against a darker background, and they both work. And that's the thing about photography. There's never going to be one way to shoot any given image. There's all these techniques and these, not tricks, but these methods of making images that you want to keep building on over time, and just know that the goal is to make a pleasing photograph. And maybe that means sometimes you do one thing and sometimes you do another thing. But as long as you're learning and growing and you're trying new things and you're building off of what you've done before, then you're making progress and your images will be better as a result.